You're watching an Involve Me tutorial on how the scoring system works and what you can do using the score element. This element behaves slightly differently based on which one of the project types you're using. Mainly, the thank you page and score-based outcome projects work similarly, and then the answer-based outcome projects works slightly differently. Let's start with the thank you page projects. For this demonstration, I am using one of our templates on how well do you know world history. So the score element is always placed on the very last page. In this case, the thank you page. You can find it by scrolling all the way down on the elements menu, and then here you can find the score element. If you click on the element, you can first of all set what is your score based on. It could either be based on correctly answered questions or an individual score. For correctly answered questions, the basis of the score is the number of correctly answered questions. Only correct answers are counted, and they always count for 1 point. This is very straightforward. Something to keep in mind is that if you're using an element where the audience member can select multiple answers, they will need to select strictly all the correct answers for the answer to count as correct, and add a single point to their score. Basically, the question needs to be answered 100% correctly. And secondly, individual scores. Individual scores sum up the values of selected answers regardless of their correct or incorrect status. This only works for the multiple choice, image choice, and drop-down elements. So if I go into the element and click on it and scroll a little bit down, I can actually toggle the individual score and calculation part. Now, if I scroll slightly more down under answers, I can actually set custom values for each of these answers. And these values could really be whatever you'd like them to be. They could be very large, they could be small, they could be 0, and they could even be negative. And of course, each of these values are then added up and calculated in the score element on the last page. So to sum up, use correctly answered questions when you want to have 1 point per fully correctly answered question, and use individual scores when you want to calculate custom scores. So this should be very simple. I will also demonstrate to you really quick how this actually looks like. So as you can see, my final score was 1 out of 3. Moving on to answer-based outcome projects. Here, the score is the sum of all the answers per outcome. And of course, the outcome page with the highest score is the one presented to the audience. So what this means in practical terms is that if I have this perfect frames for your sunglasses quiz, and each of the 3 outcomes has its own score calculation, that I will only see how many points I got for my specific outcome. So for example, how much score I got for the casual frame outcome. However, if you click on the score element, you can actually select what you base your score on. So you can either base it on what we just talked about, outcome points for the specific outcome. You could even display it as distribution of all outcome points. And finally, distribution of all outcome points in percentages. Now, this is not a leaderboard, which is something that it could get confused by. This simply shows you the distribution of all the outcome points. So you can actually see visually how differently this would operate. So this would simply display the score, this would display the distribution of all the scores, and this would do the same thing, but in percentages. So here is how it could look like. My score would be a 2 out of 4 for the casual, also 2 out of 4 for the quirky. Now, something to keep in mind here is actually that since it was a tie, the last answer that I selected was the one that counted towards showing me my final outcome. The last answer counts as a sort of tiebreaker. And here I see the distribution and the percentage distribution. Again, this is not a leaderboard, just the showcase of a distribution. And of course, mechanically, this works in the exact same way as in the thank you page projects and in the score-based outcome projects. So you could trigger individual score and calculation, and then you could input individual scores under the weights right here, and you could make it whatever number you would like. And then, of course, that would have an effect on the final scores. And just like that, you know how scores are calculated within Involve Me. For more support, go to help.involve.me, and good luck getting involved.